Negative recruiting. What is actually negative recruiting? The depth chart is the most common form of negative or targeted recruiting, but you tell me what you think is dirty here. If I bring a depth chart into a kid's living room and you and I are heads up for this kid, it's a 4-star defensive end from Sarasota, Florida, and he's down to me and you, and I take your depth chart into his living room, and it's not falsified, it's accurate, and you're just loaded at his position, and I'm not, and I show him that, is that negative? Conversely, I think we can all agree, if I take your depth chart into his living room and I count all of your early enrollees on your depth chart, but I don't put them on mine, and a lot of guys that we know are leaving for the draft are still on your depth chart, but all my draft departures are gone, and it makes it look a lot easier to get playing time at my school than your school, yeah, that's probably frowned upon. That's probably a little bit more in the way of negative recruiting. So the old falsified roster, that's probably the most common way, but quicker playing time. I want to circle back to that in just a second, because I think that kind of is counterintuitive and works in the opposite way that it's intended a lot of times. Now, the other way that's very commonly heard about, always anonymously, is the trafficking and coaching rumors. Every December, if you're a major program, every December, your staff, someone on your staff, probably multiple members on your staff, up to and possibly including the head coach, are rumored to be on the move. They're either going to be fired, they're on shaky ground, or they've done such a good job that maybe they're going to get promoted and get hauled off to another university, or get an offensive coordinator position somewhere, whereas right now they're your wide receivers coach. So that's always happening, and it's really why it's important to commit to the school and not the coach, because no one's staff stays in place 4 years. Clemson's probably the one that's come the closest to it, and their entire coaching staff doesn't even stay intact for 4 years at a time. But this is usually done late in the process. My experience in hearing about this is you don't float the rumor that so-and-so's linebackers coach is going to take the defensive coordinator position at so-and-so. You don't do it in November, because that gives the opposition enough time to dispel the rumor. No, what you want to do is you want to float it out there about 96 hours, 72 hours, meteorologically, 96, 72 hours before signing day, to where it sort of muddies the water if it's close, and maybe that's what pushes you over the top. Is that dirty? Maybe, probably, kinda, but I think a lot of people do it. Now, here's the one that I think is used a lot more than people realize. Campus safety. This one works really well with moms. If you can convince the mother of a recruit doesn't really care so much. Most of the time, dad doesn't really care so much, but if you can get in mom's ear and you can convince mom that, Mom, I don't, listen, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I know you said that State University leads for him right now. Have you seen the crime statistics since 2014 from that city? Here, you can look at it. It's on paper. It must be true. I don't necessarily know if I'd want to send Junior into that kind of environment. He could be doing everything right, and then all of a sudden one day, just be in the wrong part of town, and there you go. I know of one very high-profile recruitment from very close to where I grew up that was swayed using this tactic. Something happened in one town. It was very unfortunate, but it was an isolated incident. But the coaches at the other program, needless to say, pounced on that, and they convinced mom that place is not safe. You can't be sending your kid there, and it worked. This kid plays in the NFL now, and it worked. So is that dirty? Yeah, in that case it was, because it was kind of falsified, it was misrepresented, but it worked. The fun versus structure, that whole thing. We have fun here. They're all about business there. You're not going to have fun if you go there. We're all about fun. No program that's winning at an insanely high level is about anything other than structure. Every one of them is about structure. Even some of the ones that aren't good are all about structure. They just have bad structure. It's built on a flimsy foundation. Everyone's about structure. And so you see this applied a lot of times if you know you're behind in a recruitment, or if you're recruiting against one of the perennial powerhouse programs. A lot of folks use this against Alabama. A lot of folks use it against Ohio State. It's, they're all business there. They don't really have fun. We have fun here. I don't normally see that one work out a whole lot with the guys who are wired the way that those programs would want you to be wired to begin with. But you could also manipulate stats. And you can really do this with anything. Anyone, if you're a receiver, for example, I can convince you, and I can cherry pick stats all day long, that we, based on these numbers, are going to throw the ball more than they do. That stuff's easy to do, and that's done pretty much by everyone. And I don't really necessarily know if I would consider that as dirty or negative as some of the other things that we're talking about here. But here's the whole thing. I wanted to circle back to the promise of easier playing time, a quicker path to playing time, or maybe in some cases just outright promising playing time. A lot of times, I have found, talking to some of the bigger staffs lately, a lot of times that backfires. A lot of times it's a natural filtration process. There's this reverse psychological approach that a lot of the perennial big boys take when the opposition is trying to tell kids, well, you're not going to start there. You're going to get buried on the depth chart because look at all these other good players they have. I can tell you, a lot of those big programs, when you try that, they go to the kid's living room and the kid says, is all this true? And they say, yep, it's true. We do have all those good players. And we're not going to stop recruiting players at your position if you sign here. It's that whole, Nick Saban to Julio Jones once upon a time. I'm going to win with you, but I'm also going to win without you. It's sort of ball's in your court. We'd love to have you, but we'll get someone just as good, just like that, if you don't come here. That scares some kids off. But the thing about it is, if you are an Alabama, if you are a Clemson, if you are an Ohio State, and you're trying to cruise at the top of the sport every year, the kind of guys that you have to have on your roster by default are the kind of guys that are attracted to the challenge, that are attracted to the competition. And the ones that you were probably going to end up excommunicating from your program 2 years in are the ones who are scared away by competition to begin with. They naturally gravitate towards the easier road. So you talk to some of these assistant coaches and they tell you, we don't even fight the whole depth chart thing anymore. If they're telling the truth, we don't even sugarcoat it for kids. We use that as a natural filter so that we find out whether a kid's mentally possessing what it takes to play here in his junior or senior year in high school, as opposed to signing him, getting on campus, and then he flakes out 2 years into his college career, because that's what we call a wasted scholarship spot. So I like that question. I wanted to go a little bit further in depth on it. That was a good one.